Welcome back or welcome to the channel, my friend. If this is your first time, I typically go over what life is like in and around Northwest Arkansas, in and around Bentonville, Arkansas. But today, because I'm getting so many requests about it, because there is a major shift getting ready to happen, today's going to be a little bit more about a how-to video on buying a home in Arkansas in 2024 and going forward. If you're a buyer in the marketplace, you may have heard recently about the settlement between the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors. And I'm curious, has someone taken the time to sit down with you and explain the changes of what that looks like for you as a home buyer going into touring properties? I would either bet not, or I would bet to believe that you probably have some questions yourself. Today's video, we're going to talk about buying a home in Arkansas in 2024, and we're going to specifically talk about contracts, commissions, and contingent offers. Now, my friend, we're going to go into major detail. This could be a very lengthy video, but I believe it's needed, and I believe it needs to be explained on more of a detailed level than just maybe reading something online that isn't given context. So that's the meaning of this message for you today. Before we dig into commissions, contracts, and contingent offers, the two major changes that I'll explain throughout this process that has come a result of that settlement is, one, buyer agency agreements must be signed prior to touring properties. We'll get into that here in a moment. That's part of the contract section. And then the second part is, if you are a realtor or you are a brokerage and a member of the National Association of Realtors, your local board is a member of that, we can no longer advertise commissions or mention of commissions in our MLS. That doesn't mean that commissions are going away. It means it's no longer advertised on a syndicated website or an aggregated website like the MLS, like ShowingTime, like Zillow, for instance, cannot post what buyer agent commissions are going to be. Depending on where you're coming from, there are multiple different contracts set up different ways and people are practicing business in a different way, but those are the two major changes that help dictate how changes are going to take place for real estate agents and for the consuming public going forward. If you're buying a home in Arkansas in 2024 and going forward, there are really two different types of buyer agency agreements. But before we talk about that, you should understand that you don't have to be represented. You just need to have that conversation with the realtor who might be showing you the property on behalf of the seller. That opens up a whole other can of worms that we aren't going to discuss today. But essentially, you don't have to be represented when you buy a home. If you are choosing to work with a realtor, there are really two different types of buyer representation agreements. There's non-exclusive agreements and there are exclusive agreements. I'm of the practice that if you're wanting to work with Anthony when buying a home, I work on exclusivity. If you're wanting to sign a non-exclusive agreement with me, I'm probably not the agent for you. On our exclusive and non-exclusive agreements, it goes into detail on fiduciary responsibilities, timeline of the contract. All Arkansas contracts have a termination date. There are no open-ended contracts in Arkansas, and that's going to come into play when we talk about our purchase agreement, our inspection contingencies. All Arkansas contracts have a termination date or an end date in which the contract needs to end or be finalized or fully executed. Because my practice is exclusivity, buyer exclusive agreement, when you're choosing to work with me, we're going to have a start date and an end date. And of course, please understand, my friend, before agreeing to work together, we're going to have a much more in-depth conversation to understand your needs, your wants. How many bedrooms, bathrooms? What's your family like? Do you have a grand piano that needs to fit in the property? Many people have come to me in the past and said, hey, Anthony, can't we just go look at a few homes? I'm just curious right now. And in the past, I've been able to say, yeah, sure, no problem. Let's go check out a couple houses. But my friend, now going forward, because of the recent settlement and because of laws changing, we have to sign a buyer representation agreement prior to looking at homes. Just like when you go and hire a dentist, just like when you go to your doctor's office, they're going to have you sit down and fill out information, fill out an agreement prior to working with that professional, just like your attorney. The same now is taking place with a real estate agent, with a real estate broker. No matter where you're coming from, it is the same across the country. The same goes for me, my friend. We're going to have a buyer representation agreement in place. It might be property specific. It might be for the weekend. It might be for 6 months. It might be for a year. I typically sign them for a year just because it can sometimes take that long. And of course, once you close on a home, my fiduciary responsibilities to you as a buyer don't end. That continues on even after the contract has been closed. And of course, a major piece that goes into buyer representation agreements is, what does the compensation look like? How does the agent get paid? Who's paying the commission? That's what has spurred a lot of the lawsuit between the Department of Justice and the National Association of Realtors, is specifically being upfront as to who's paying what. In Arkansas, we've had a buyer representation agreement for quite some time now. Same with other states that I practice in. In Missouri and in Minnesota also have buyer representation agreements. It's different states across the United States that don't have a buyer representation agreement and or who's paying what in regards to the commission or fees that are going to be paid. Now we signed our buyer representation agreement and we're working together. We're going out and we're looking at properties. The next contract that comes into play is our purchase contract. Purchase contract is going to line out things like what the property address is, the legal description. Are you paying cash? Are you going to get a loan? What is the purchase price? Are there any deposits that you're going to put down? Pausing here on deposits, Arkansas has both earnest money and we also have non-refundable deposits as part of our contracts. You can do one, both, or neither, depending on the situation in which you're offering. If it's competitive and we're working together, I have different ways that we can tweak to make sure that our offer might stand out above the rest. Also in the contract are going to be terms in regards to personal property. Is the television included? Is the washer, dryer, the refrigerator going to be part of the contract? Are there certain things in the contract that you don't want to be included, like maybe the sandbox or the playset that's outside? You want the seller to remove those personal property items before closing. Of course, in Arkansas, we have termites. My friend, termite policies sometimes are required depending on your loan type. Not a lender. Maybe I shouldn't say never. Not going to happen. Who's going to pay for the termite policy? Would you like to have a survey done? Are there any contingencies to your contract, like you need to sell another home somewhere else in order to purchase the home here in Arkansas? Very common, and we're going to talk about that a little bit further in its own section in regards to contingent offers and what that looks like here in Arkansas. And in Northwest Arkansas specifically as to what's going on in our market. More terms include, do you want an inspection to be done? Other terms include who's paying for title services or mortgage policies. Is there a property disclosure? And if there isn't, are you requesting that of the seller? Or perhaps maybe you're a licensed agent, but you're asking me to represent you. Is any party to the contract a licensed real estate agent? And finally, at the end of our purchase contract is, when does this offer expire? Is it going to expire tonight at 6, tomorrow at 7? Then finally, we're presenting your offer with a pre-approval or maybe proof of funds if you're buying cash. Depending on your type of financing, we need to include one of those with our offer to make sure the seller knows that you're financially soluble in order to purchase this property. Then, of course, the seller has the ability to accept your terms, counter your terms, or reject your offer altogether. Let's go ahead and keep it vanilla, and let's say the seller accepted your offer as written. Now, there are many different caveats that can happen in a real estate transaction, and then of course it's helpful to have your realtor guide you through each and every step and be communicative throughout the entire process. Now let's say we're on to the home inspection timeline. We have what's called an inspection, repair, and survey addendum. In the state of Arkansas, it's very common that you have 10 business days, wherever you're coming from. You may have calendar days, but 10 business days, not including national holidays, to do any and all inspections. That doesn't mean you can do one inspection, you're done. You have 10 business days to do any and all inspections you'd like to do. Maybe you'd like to have a home inspector. You'd like to have the septic looked at. You'd like to hire an electrician or a plumber or a roofer to come look at those specific elements of the home. And as a result of those items, you have the ability on the inspection, repair, and survey addendum to ask the seller either to provide you concessions in lieu of repairs, no repairs, or finally, here are the items that were found in the inspection report that you might not be agreeable to in order to move forward with the contract. Of course, my friend, we're not going to get into all the idiosyncrasies inside the contract, but this is helping you understand that maybe in Arkansas, we don't have an option period like you might have in Texas. I'm not a licensed agent in Texas, but I understand they have what's called an option period. We don't have that here in Arkansas. Of course, you can waive your inspection rights, but I would not advise that. In good confidence, let's say there was nothing that came up as a result of the home inspection. Now we move on to the lender ordering the appraisal, which is a non-interested third party to come in and determine the valuation of what's on the contract. The home will either appraise above value, at value, or below value, which is on the contract. Of course, if it's below value, and as a listing agent, that's usually the only time that I hear if it doesn't appraise is if it appraises for below value. Here in Northwest Arkansas in 2024, I personally in my own practice have seen properties appraised for above, at, or below contract price. Now, what happens after that, we can get into those details, but it's the same in most any other state. If the property doesn't appraise, the buyer typically has the ability to walk on for the property. Many times people want to try to work through it. They still want to buy the house, the seller still wants to sell the house. Is there something that can be negotiated in the middle? Regardless of where you are in the United States, a lender is going to lend on the appraised value or the contract price, whichever is less. Still not a lender, but whichever is less. So let's say the property is $850,000 is what's on the contract, and the property appraises for $825,000. You've got a $25,000 delta in there that needs to be made up. Either the seller needs to come down to $825,000, the buyer needs to come up with another $25,000 to make the contract right at $850,000, or possibly the buyer and the seller will meet somewhere in the middle and negotiate on the purchase price or maybe some other terms or personal property that can be included in the contract. Of course, if you ask the seller for a seller property disclosure and or they're willingly giving you one, the seller's going to, in their best ability or their best remembrance of the property, help you understand the property condition. Are there any broken windows? Has there been any flooding happening? Is it in a flood zone? Who are the companies providing utilities to the home? Are there any material facts about the property like the roof is damaged and needs to be replaced? Multiple different questions are asked on the seller property disclosure to help you know everything you can possibly know about that property before you move forward. I would always encourage you, even though you have the seller property disclosure in hand and they've told you within their best knowledge what's going on with the property, I would still encourage you to do a home inspection on the property. Something you should know is not every state in the United States do home inspectors need to be licensed. Well, here in Arkansas, if you are a practicing home inspector, you need to have a home inspection licensed. You also, as a home inspector, need to have errors and omissions insurance and general liability insurance. How do I know this? I used to be an inspector myself. No longer an inspector. That was before I got my real estate license over a decade ago. As I'm no longer a licensed home inspector, I still have that experience that I've gained through those years and through those hundreds of homes that I've inspected to help pass that knowledge on to you where applicable. Either way, still encourage you to get a home inspection. So if you've learned anything so far in this video, please get a home inspection. Of course, if you've asked for a survey as part of your contract, either you might ask the seller for the most recent survey or the most recorded survey, or perhaps you want to go through the process of hiring a surveyor yourself. Maybe you're purchasing a property with 55 acres and it's hard to determine where the property lines are. It might be a good idea to get a professional survey done so you know exactly where the boundary lines are. As part of a professional survey, you can ask them to include an updated legal description to include with the purchase of your property. Okay, let's say we've gone all the way through the contract. Home inspection turned out well. The appraisal came in at value. The seller property disclosure said everything and everything was clear and you're good to go. Next steps would be to do what's called a final walkthrough. Now, of course, there's the whole lending side. They're going to do their verification of employment. They're going to do final underwriting. But as far as our real estate contract is concerned, we still have our final walkthrough to go through. Now, I'm going to digress a little bit. Let's say that you asked the seller to replace the water heater because it wasn't working. During our final walkthrough, we had the ability to go through the home prior to closing and make sure that that water heater is now working, or it's been replaced, or they've provided the receipts in order to prove that they have properly had that done. And then the next steps in Arkansas is you go to a closing table. In Arkansas, we are a title state, not an attorney state. We use title agents to transfer the property out of the seller's name and into the buyer's name. And of course, once we close and the property has funded if you're using a lender, or the wire transfer has gone through if you're doing cash, then the agent can then deliver you possession to the property. With so many people moving to Arkansas from different states and different countries all the time, it's very common that somebody needs to sell a home in a different state in order to purchase and close on a home here in Arkansas. So next we're going to talk about contingent offers. And my friends, as a broker here in Arkansas, that is my absolute least favorite offer to present to a seller is a contingent offer. Now, of course, that might be the situation that you're in. You might not want to move twice, or you might want to make sure that money moves the same day from one house to the next. But we can navigate that together. I'm happy to do that for you. Let's break that contingency down a little bit further. Given that there's multiple different scenarios that can take place, I'm going to give you a couple different facets to a contingent offer that a seller might be willing to accept. The least likely one that a seller is going to accept is a contingent offer from a buyer whose house elsewhere isn't even on the market yet. The next would be the house is on the market and they've got an accepted offer. The next would be the house is on the market, they got an accepted offer and they're past inspection. And then the next best would be it's on the market, it's got an accepted offer, it's past inspections, it's past appraisal, and now they're just literally waiting to close in order to then purchase the home here in Arkansas. If you are planning on purchasing a home in Arkansas, the further you are along in the process, the more apt a seller would be willing to accept your contract. If we are agreeing to work together and you would like me to help you write a contingent offer, we're going to discuss putting in terminology in there that's protecting you as the buyer. Not only is it contingent upon the successful sale of your property, but it's also contingent upon the successful closing of your property wherever you're moving from, because you can't buy that home here in Arkansas until you've successfully closed. Not until it's gone under contract. You still have to close on this property in order to purchase this one. Now, of course, there might be caveats out there where you can get a bridge loan or where you might be able to carry two notes at once, and that's for your lender, still not a lender, to be able to help guide you through that process. But I'm going to make sure that we discuss making sure that both of those pieces to your contract wherever you're moving from allow you to close on the home here in Arkansas. On our Arkansas residential contracts, there are two types of contingent offers to be received: binding with escape clause or binding without escape clause. When we write those for our buyers, we typically say the seller has no escape clause. They don't have the ability to enter into other contracts. Now, of course, the seller might be agreeable to that, depending on how far you are along in the contract and what other terms you might have in your purchase agreement. But many sellers are going to probably counter with, hey, I want the ability to still market this property. So if another non-contingent offer comes along, they have the ability to kick you out. It's called a kick-out clause. They have the ability to kick you out after a certain amount of time of notifying you in writing that there is another offer that they'd like to pursue. Of course, they have to pursue yours first, but they give you a defined amount of time. Of course, if we're agreeing to work together, I'll go through all of this with you. There are some upcoming changes on our 2024 forms here in Arkansas that are going to define when the timelines start for other areas of the contract, like when the deposits are due or when the inspection time frame starts. That is something that's going to be updated on our 2024 contracts. Of course, again, if we're agreeing to work together, I'll help guide you through that. At the end of the day, in Arkansas in 2024, you can get a contingent offer accepted. Are sellers willing to do that? Some are, and some are not, and some are, maybe depending on the terms of where you are in your contingency. As a reminder, have you not listed the house yet, or are you literally just waiting for closing to happen? All the other contingencies in your offer, wherever you're selling from, have been met. Okay, my friend, last but certainly not least, the most debated and controversial topic that is going on right now is agent commissions. How much are agents getting paid? Are they getting paid too much? Who pays what? There's a lot of misunderstanding as to what's going on with buyer agent commissions. You might hear people say buyer agent commissions are going away, or you might hear the seller doesn't have to pay a buyer agent commission. The seller's never had to pay a buyer agent commission. Is it in their best interest to do so? Yeah, probably so. But I'm not licensed in any other state except Arkansas or Missouri right now, and I can't advise you one way or the other. In generally speaking, if you're in Arkansas and you're selling your home, in my opinion, it'd be wise of you to offer a buyer agent commission. And due to Sherman antitrust laws, I'm not going to talk in this video about what those commissions should be. If we're agreeing to work together on the purchase or sale of a property, I'm going to go into extreme depth on agent commissions and who gets paid what in what scenario. Know here in Arkansas that we've updated many of our forms to abide by the Department of Justice and the National Association's recent settlement on our listing contracts as well as our buyer representation agreements. It very much lines out who gets paid what, and we're going to disclose to you, sometimes in redundancy, who gets paid what and how much and when. You as a buyer may get some help on the buyer representation agreement if there's a percentage in there that you're obligated to pay. Some or all of that can be covered by the selling side. And again, my friend, buyer agent commissions can no longer be advertised on a syndicated or an aggregated website. Buyer agents and listing agents are going to have to be in communication as to what is negotiated between the seller and the buyer, what terms can be done there. So if you're an agent watching this, my friend, pick up your phone so we can have a conversation about this and serve our clients best together. As mentioned earlier, just like when you hire a dentist or a doctor, you want to know about their credentials. The same thing goes when hiring a real estate agent, my friend. You want to make sure that you're working with somebody that has done this before, that has negotiated before, that's going to serve you to the best of their ability in helping you with the purchase process in Arkansas in 2024 going forward. Bear with me if this is later than 2024 that you're watching this video. Of course, laws may have changed since then. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about any recent changes that are going on with the settlement and or real estate practice going forward. As always, my friend, it's my pleasure to put this information together for you. Now you know a little bit more about what life is like in and around Bentonville and in Arkansas. Thanks for watching.